Kaiser back again, and this video I want to talk more about the actual things we as traditionalists need to do. And for this video I'm speaking mostly to traditionalist Catholics. Perennial traditionalists might find some of these points of interest, but no, for the most part I'm talking to traditionalist Catholics here. That's my primary audience. Now, the first thing you need to do to rehabilitate the Catholic Church is to accept that it's dead. Now, before you cry sacrilege or blasphemy, I want you to honestly, really look at the Catholic Church today. I want you to, just as an exercise, if you still find yourself completely and utterly unable to accept this fact, I want you to go to as many Catholic priests, theologians of the conciliar type as possible. And I want you to just talk to them about Catholicism. Just say you want to talk to them about, Catholicism. You want to talk about theology. You want to talk about history. Church historians, too. Just go to them, I want you to talk about church history, and I want you to talk about theology with them. And I want you to just throw things out there that you know, historically speaking, and you can verify from authoritative documents and church teachers and doctors that are Catholic. I want you to just talk about these pieces with them. And I want you to really gauge their reaction to these things. I want you to see what they think. I want you to see what they teach. I want you to go to your average Catholic Mass, and I want you to compare it to what you think a Mass is, based off of the, pre-conciliar Mass and, even pre-Tridentine. And I want you to really think about what's going on in these parishes. What kind of people are in these pews? What kind of people there are considered devout Catholics? And I want you to really, really think about one thing. Is this Catholicism? Is there any continuity here between or with Catholicism as it was and Catholicism as it is? And, the furnishings of these churches aside, there may be honest budget concerns, and while I think most people just don't want to build churches as they should be built, and, aesthetics completely aside, aesthetics have to be taken into account, but just all of that, their theology and everything brought into consideration, the books they have, read some of them. Could any of this honestly be put in continuity with the previous thousands of years of Catholic tradition that we have to go off of, that Catholics were building on previously? Is there any evidence they even use this for a foundation? If not, perhaps you should reconsider what the Catholic Church is today. Square away as much as you can your beliefs about Catholicism with the mainstream church of today. And I want you to see if by the time you do that, you can still want to join the Catholic Church. I'm going to bet that you won't want to. I want you to think about, just run some names by these people. Just run some historical figures by these clergy. See if they even know who they are. See if they agree with an assessment of them as defenders of the Catholic faith. Or just pull some theological quotes, some things are orthodox, completely, just out of thin air, and just pull them out there, actual quotes, and see their reactions to them without telling them who said them. Just insert them in a conversation organically and see what they say. I'm willing to bet you can pull quotes from most former popes, from most defenders of Catholicism, and they will totally disagree with you. They will disagree with them. And I think that would be the best litmus test to see if you could really be considered Catholic by the definitions of the Catholic Church today. Now, you can argue that organically, even in the past, things changed with the Catholic Church, and that's understandable. Just certain changes are understandable, but the dogmas and doctrines of the Catholic Church have never changed. Practices of the Catholic Church and the traditions of it have been considered respected and sacrosanct down through the centuries, even things that are now somewhat obsolete today. Even well into the modern age, some of these things were acceptable. And while it could be argued, perhaps, that some things needed to be changed, as they were down through the histories with administration and things like that, it cannot be argued that the doctrines and dogmas and the sacred practices of the faithful that have made saints and have kept souls pure for hundreds of years should not be discarded. And neither should cherished positions and honorary titles, because these things have a certain weight to them. They have a certain validity to them. But yeah, just do that, and tell me if you're still Catholic after trying to square yourself away with the mainstream church. I bet you won't. I'm going to bet you won't be. Or you'll just have totally bought into modernism And, if you do that, then I'm so sorry. So, keeping that in mind, the Catholic Church is, in fact, dead. As you know it, and as I know it, and as I wanted to join it, as you wanted to join it, as you were raised in it, what have you, it doesn't exist. It is not Catholicism. The mainstream church, Rome, is not protecting or advancing Catholicism. It isn't. It honest to God, isn't. Any honest, unbiased person has to accept that. Once you've wrapped your mind around that, I understand it's a lot to ask of a person. It took me a while to get where I am now. It took a lot for me to accept what I'm trying to tell people to accept now. But once I did, it made me realize how much work needed to be done to restore it. There's nothing wrong with admitting the Catholic Church is institutionally dead, people. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being able to be honest with yourself and just say that my religion's in a bad position. There's nothing wrong with that at all. There's nothing terrible about that at all. Many church fathers have done that. Many of them have been honest about the state of the church of today. And granted, we've never been off as bad as we are now, but quite frankly, I don't think even someone as faithful as Catherine of Siena would look at the Catholic Church of today and just offhand, out of some blind ancestral loyalty, completely disregard the Church of today, would just completely disregard, say, oh no, everything's fine, or oh no, we can still be faithful to Rome. But how would you be faithful to Rome when Rome says things like conversion is not necessary? I mean, you can't reasonably claim you're in communion with Pope Francis on some points. You just can't. No Catholic can. No one can claim that. It's just unprecedented what we're seeing here. A Pope completely unrestrained, going against Catholicism, deriding Catholicism, just absolutely unfettered, going and saying these things. It's just unprecedented. As much as we want to say that it is. Do what you have to do to just accept this hard fact, that Catholicism is dead. Do what you have to do to understand and accept that. Just contemplate with me for a second that even Catholics in countries like Syria, the Middle East, North Africa, France, I think I said France already, Italy, Spain, Germany, the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Poland, all these traditionally Catholic countries, South America, all these places are following modern Catholicism. They're not following old Catholicism. They're not following authentic Christianity. They're following modern Christianity. And they're not doing very well even at that. This is something that we simply have to come to grips with if we are going to fix the problem. Because we can't fix the problem if we act like it's not there. Because the problem is there. And ignoring it or trying to hide from it, has not done anything to get it fixed faster. What it comes down to is this. Do you want to just preserve your little enclave of traditionalism and high churchness and masses and all this other stuff and nice dressed women and all this other stuff? Do you want to preserve that and just stay cushion comfy? Or do you want to save souls, which is what Christ demanded we do before anything else? And you need to answer that question, and you need to square it away with 2,000 years of saints who have literally tried to save the world. And some of them have succeeded remarkably. They've saved whole continents, they made Christendom, basically. Now, having that said, after accepting Catholicism is dead, you do whatever you have to do to accept that, you need to learn Catholicism. You need to just scrap everything after 1962. After John the 23rd. You just need to ignore it. Completely, utterly ignore it. Just pretend it does not exist. Just pretend their teaching it's heretical, it's not available to you. And you need to go back and you need to look at what our ancestors believed as Catholicism. When your parents, if you are the parent, if you are the child or the descendant, or if you were raised Catholic by people who knew Catholicism before 1962, okay, and they were devout, you need to look at Catholicism that they knew And you need to learn that Catholicism. Because I'm willing to bet they would not, assuming they're dead, they would not put up with what Rome is doing to Catholicism. They wouldn't put up with it. Has no one ever asked why so many Catholics left the church after Vatican II? Has no one asked that? Is it possible, and I've heard these stories before, is it not possible that Catholics left the Catholic Church because it wasn't Catholic anymore? And they just didn't know what else to do? Is that reaction really just so unreasonable? Many people leave, franchises or fandoms or sports teams or anything. They leave their countries of birth because these things do not represent what they used to represent anymore. This is a perfectly normal and perfectly fine human reaction to these events. But ultimately, I think you'll find yourself unable to give up on Catholicism, like I have. Because you know it's a good thing. You cannot simply accept that something this good suddenly loses all value. You cannot accept that. You refuse to accept that. And I'm asking you to refuse to accept that. To learn the faith, to study the faith, and to embrace it as your ancestors embraced it. Embrace it as the people who converted Europe and ruled Europe accepted it and embraced it and defended it. Because ultimately, you have to understand that the church in 1812, in 1816, would have condemned the church of 2016 completely. Because it is not identifiable as Catholic. Nothing they teach or say, or even wear, identifies them as Catholic. They would be denounced and derided as usurpers, as heretics. Completely. Absolutely. But the church of 1816 and 1916 would not have this problem, and so on through the ages, because they had a theological continuity. They had practices that were identifiable from one century to the next. It's completely possible. So, after you do that, there are still more things you have to do, more things you have to consider. And considering how small my phone's memory is and the unique predicament I find myself in, I'm going to have to end the video here. And then in the next video, I'm going to discuss what you need to do after accepting, 1, Catholicism is dead, and then 2, learning about Catholicism when it was alive. When it was well, when it was healthy, and when it was the predominant faith. It was what is the most powerful and predominant religious faiths of the world. Not the Catholicism of today, which is, quite frankly, just dead.